Welcome to Follow to Lead, where we discover how to listen for and follow God's call so that we might lead others to God. Our shared stories of inspiration from religious leaders and those active in the educational ministry of the church can help you know better how God is calling you and the role passionate Catholic education plays in spreading His message of faith, hope, and love. Now please welcome the hosts of Follow to Lead, Father Randy Sly and Kyle Pietrantonio.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Christ the teacher, teach us to listen. Teach us to do the deep listening to the sounds of our soul, waiting to hear your voice calling us to cast out deeper, to become fishers of men and women, shepherds of souls, to follow your will in order to lead others to the truth, beauty, and goodness only you can offer. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, amen. Welcome to Follow to Lead, a journey twice a month into the world of Catholic education and our faith, exploring what it means to follow God in order to lead others to Him. I'm Father Randy Sly, your host. And today we will be talking with Matthew Sanders, the founder and CEO of Longbeard in Quebec City in Canada. And Matthew started his career as an infantry officer in the Canadian Forces until retiring to enter the Catholic Seminary, studying at Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. And realizing he was called to marriage, he left seminary and returned to Toronto, initially working for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and then in the professional consulting industry. But he was offered a position in the Archdiocese of Toronto, helping to rebuild the Office of Spiritual Affairs, which he did. He served as Cardinal Collins Special Projects Manager and then felt the call to found his new company, Longbeard, which focuses on building artificial intelligence, or we call AI products, to serve the Church's mission. Magisterium AI, a generative AI product focused on making the Church teachings and Catholic insight more accessible, and it's currently being used in 165 countries. Then there is Vulgate, which is an AI-powered library platform powering an historic digitation project with many of the pontifical universities in Rome. It's considered to be one, if not the most advanced library platform in the world, leveraging computer vision, natural language processing, and generative artificial intelligence. Most recently, Longbeard launched a new Big Tent video platform for Catholic content creators called Christendom. Matthew is also the CEO of the Humanity 2.0 Foundation based in Washington, D.C., focused on accelerating human flourishing, as well as a venture advisor at Clues Ventures and an executive mentor at the world's largest aerospace accelerator out of UCLA called Starburst. After 5 years in Rome and 2 years in Malta, Matthew has returned to his home in Canada and currently lives and works from Quebec City. So, Matthew, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
And, with all that you're doing, I just want to thank you for taking this time. I know you're very busy. And also, this month, you're going to be at our summit for the Duke and Altum Schools Collaborative. So I know everybody will be looking forward to seeing you there. And we like to begin the program each time by giving our guest an opportunity to just share a little bit about themselves. And so could you just tell us about your upbringing?
Sure. So I was baptized in the Anglican Church and then later confirmed in the Lutheran Church. But I most of my young adult life was spent in the Evangelical Church until my last year of high school. I ended up kind of falling for a Catholic girl, and she said that she was going to go to the Catholic college at the University of Toronto. I said, okay, well, if that's where you're going, I'll go there too. And oddly enough, she ended up pulling out and going somewhere else last minute, and I ended up just stuck at a Catholic college. And at that point, I had all the typical, I would say, biases that a lot of evangelicals had about the Catholic Church. But I was immersed in this kind of Catholic, ecosystem. So I thought, well, I should probably learn a little bit about it. And so there was a class that was offered at the University of St. Michael's College, University of Toronto, called Why the Church, which was based on Gio Sani's writing, the founder of Communion Liberation. So I decided to take that because I asked myself that question a lot. And I went in there with all my prejudices, and I felt like the entire semester was just a professor and I going back and forth. But in the end, he dismantled me philosophically and theologically, and that made me realize there's a lot more to the Catholic Church than I thought. And slowly but surely, as I learned more, I fell more and more in love with the Church, and that's ultimately what led me to feel the conviction to enter seminary.
That's fascinating. And you and I both share that heritage of being, I was raised in the Episcopal Church, then became evangelical, and later, of course, returned to Anglicanism and ultimately to the Catholic Church. And with your time, you also entered into the military. Was that right after graduating from the University of Toronto?
Well, I enrolled when I was actually in college, and so I kind of was doing kind of college on the side while I was being trained, and worked in the military for full time for a number of years, and that certainly was an interesting experience, and I think it actually helped me grow my faith. I think I went in there with the intention that through the military I'd find a higher way to serve, but I quickly realized that as much as I respected everything I had learned, and I loved the soldiers I was serving with, that serving through means of arms wasn't probably in my own experience, the best way to serve. And so I was looking for a different kind of calling, different way to serve, and the priesthood ended up calling to me.
So at that point, you left the military service and entered seminary at Catholic U. What was your experience there at Catholic U? Was that when you basically got involved in the foundation that you currently have?
So no, I actually entered seminary with the Paulist Fathers, and they were based in Washington D.C. And so that's how I ended up studying at the Catholic University of America. It wasn't until I left seminary and then eventually worked for the Archdiocese of Toronto, as you'd mentioned, and then started the company. After I started Longbeard, about a year or two after we started it, I started doing consulting work in Rome, and then with the Holy See and the Pontifical Universities, and that became a much more regular consulting, consulting effort. And so eventually we moved to the headquarters of the company there, and that's when I made the move. And while I was working there, mainly doing technological infrastructure consulting, and we were helping build websites and some other technology products for our clients there, I guess I got kind of known as one of the tech guys in Rome, and it eventually resulted in us teaming up with Google to help the Holy Father set up his migration refugee section, kind of a cutting edge technological infrastructure. And then I started getting involved in more of these kind of technological conversations, really with big tech, trying to understand how they can collaborate with the Holy See, and how can the Holy See collaborate better with big tech, in the interest of serving the common good. And I realized that there was kind of a middleware problem. They had difficulty understanding one another, and so we started the Humanities 2.0 Foundation to kind of serve as a middleware, and that's eventually what led me to getting more involved with things like artificial intelligence, which eventually will become the focus of our company.
Now let's talk about artificial intelligence in general, because I think there's a lot of confusion. I think most people that have any information or experience with AI, it's through Chat GPT and maybe playing around with it and those kinds of things. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of fear. Could you just kind of give us a very basic understanding of what we mean by artificial intelligence?
Sure. A lot of people think of kind of artificial intelligence as kind of like this monolithic thing, but it's actually artificial intelligence represents kind of a field of study. So it's kind of like physics, right? Within physics, you have thermodynamics and everything else. Artificial intelligence, there's a bunch of disciplines within artificial intelligence. Several. Machine learning is one, which is basically what powers ChatGPT. Then you have computer vision, which basically powers Tesla's autopilot. And there's a whole bunch of other technologies as well. So artificial intelligence essentially is kind of humanity's quest to replicate human cognition inside of a machine. So basically the ability to think, learn, and know. What I will say about artificial intelligence, I think I probably don't have to belabor this point because I think there's a lot of fear mongering about this, but I think it's the most important technology humanity's ever invented. Sundar Pichai from Google says it's more important than fire. Ultimately, it will be. And that sounds absurd, but I think he may actually be right. And so I think that it's ultimately it's a tool which humanity has to wield responsibly. It has enormous potential to serve humanity and the common good, as Pope Francis has said, but also it has enormous possibility for harm. And so we have to be very careful in how we develop it into play.
There, of course, are a lot of people who say, well, this is kind of the machines taking over the world. And all of this kind of thinking back to some of the movies where we see some of that thing taking place. How do you help people to alleviate fears that the machines will become running us? We still see, I mean, there is still a limitation to artificial intelligence in terms of humanness, isn't there?
Absolutely. Let me put things in perspective. There are four kind of hallmarks of intelligence. One would be persistent memory. Two would be the ability to kind of reason. Three would be the ability to understand the world around us, so physically how it works. And the fourth is the ability to plan. And AI systems can do none of those things. So when we say artificial intelligence, that's more of a hopeful term, or it's what we're kind of building towards. But artificial intelligence doesn't truly reason. It does on at a very kind of basic level. And there's a lot of distilled, I would say, wisdom inside of their parameters or inside of their brains, but they don't reason like us, and their capabilities are still very limited. Now that's changing every month. ChatGPT, or sorry, actually OpenAI just released a new product, ChatGPT o1, which has some pretty extraordinary potential for reasoning capabilities. But it's up until now, they see human beings are driving the technology. We're guiding it, and we're building it every step of the way. And so there is this kind of concern that once we hit something called AGI, artificial general intelligence, where basically a machine would have the ability to kind of would have generalized intelligence, which means it could do many of the things a human could do, or at least a big chunk of those things. That this kind of concerns people, because it could have a lot of impact on the job market and other things. But even so, with the onset of AGI, this is still something that's very much still within our control. And so we as a civilization have to determine how we want to employ this tool to serve humanity. Then up from AGI, the next step, which is ultimately the one that existentially people worry about the most, is called ASI, or artificial superintelligence. And this would basically be an intelligence which is, in theory, smarter than all human beings combined.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that starts becoming more civilizationally challenging. How do we manage this thing? How do we make sure it's safe? But the important thing to note, and Jan LeCun says this, who's the head of Meta AI, that AGI and ASI are not going to be an event. So it's not going to be like Terminator, like with Skynet. Just all of a sudden, boom, we have this AGI and ASI, and oh my goodness, what do we do with this thing? It's a very long process, and it involves companies from all over the world. And so I don't think we have to wake up. We don't have to worry when we go to sleep. The next morning we're going to wake up and the whole world's going to change because AGI is on the scene and there's rockets in the skies. That's pure fiction.
And the whole idea of awareness and humanity, humanness, again, I think of Descartes' phrase, "I think, therefore I am," is kind of being challenged a little bit in this field. But I think one of the things that it does is perhaps it helps humanity to more perfectly define who we are on something more than just the idea of thinking. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly these machine intelligence have, very soon we'll have the ability to kind of think and understand concepts and contribute very much like us. But just because there's a kind of another form of intelligence, which is, working alongside us, and human beings should consider that an existential threat. I mean, I think at the end of that, like, that's not what life's about. And I worry sometimes about. I mean, I love Elon Musk. I'm a big fan of Elon Musk. But this whole project of trying to expand human beings' computational capabilities directly by plugging in some kind of computer interface, right, so that we can kind of compete with machines. Now, I don't want to misrepresent his intentions with it, but I think that's absurd. Although, of course, you could make an argument that by using a phone, we're expanding our computational capabilities. Using a calculator, we are as well. But I think this idea that we need to directly merge man and machine so we can compete more with machines, ultimately, I think that's going to be futile. I think machines will eventually have an edge on us on that. And I think what we know as kind of Catholics, what life is about worshiping God and serving one another. And so if we make sure that we stay focused on that, then I don't think we have to be worried about machine intelligence.
And what you're talking about there would be the whole idea of transhumanism, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. Marshall McLuhan, who was one of my great heroes in media, and actually a very devout Catholic, talked many years ago, back in the 60s, about the medium being the massage. And that's one of the things he said, is that the pen is the extension of the hand. And I think we can even see artificial intelligence as an extension of who we are. It's not becoming something like human, but it's used by us to continue to express ourselves, just like the pen was able to be a way for us to express our communication by writing. And so it's fascinating to me to see how we can harness technology, and especially how we can see it involved in the church. So, what's your vision for how AI can really serve the church?
Well, this is something that I thought about a lot, and I still continue to think about, because there's more thinking that needs to be done. But ultimately, I see AI very much along the same lines as something like the printing press, right? It's a means by which we can spread the gospel and teach people about the gospel. And so for that reason, I'm very bullish on it. I think it has an enormous potential, more so than any other, like I said, technology form, more so than any tool before, to possibly just spread the gospel. And I think, in the past, there are times in the church's history when it's been very forward thinking, it's been very quick to embrace technology and tools, and had an edge. And there are times it's been a little bit slow. And I want to make sure this time that the church is embracing AI and leveraging it, so that so the gospel can reach more people. So ultimately, our vision as a company is to accelerate the adoption of AI in the church. And that's primarily what we want to do. And so kind of day in, day out, what we're trying to figure out is, how do we ensure that AI can be integrated into as many different ecosystems and many different companies, organizations, ministries as possible. And I think in doing so, I think this could lead to a very important, profound a form of the new evangelization.
And how do you see that being applied? Well, let's start with this. Let's look at Magisterium AI, which is I think your first product with Longbeard, and
Correct.
What that actually does for those who implement its use.
Sure. So Magisterium AI, which is available at magisterium.com, essentially, when ChatGPT dropped, we heard that a lot of Catholics were using it to ask questions about church teaching and things like that. And ChatGPT is an incredible product, and I'm extraordinarily grateful to the team at OpenAI and everyone who's working in the industry for building this product. But of course, there are problems with it too. One, it's not transparent about when it's generating its response, where that generation is coming from, right? So it doesn't provide you direct sources.
Right.
It does so after the fact. Sometimes they now built it in. So that was one big issue. How do you know that what it's saying is actually Catholic? And then, of course, there's also this issue of hallucination, right? AI is very eager to please, and if it doesn't have an answer in its head, it will make one up. And so, how do you tell the difference? So, what we were wondering was, is there a way to harness artificial intelligence, but to help mitigate those downsides? And so, we built Magisterium AI as kind of an experiment. And when we initially kind of built the prototype, we started kind of a global consultation with dioceses and as my own background at the Archdiocese, working in the Office of Pastoral Affairs, I recognize that this thing could do enormous good. It could also cause enormous harm. And this is people's spiritual lives we're talking about, so we need to make sure it's as faithful as possible. And so we wanted to make sure we had the right people testing it, and that was an enormously beneficial process, which is continuing to this day. But I remember I did an interview with EWTN very soon after it launched. And in hindsight, that was probably a mistake. And what happened was it went viral, and we got so much traffic, it crashed us. And ironically, we had to appeal to Sam Altman at OpenAI, and he stepped in and helped save Magisterium AI and get it back online. So I always find that was an interesting turn of fate, or somewhat ironic. But essentially, the product in a nutshell is what we're trying to make the corpus of church teaching available to people. ChatGPT is show people the use case. And so with Magisterium, we're using it. It's a very similar kind of user interface. You ask your question, and what it does is it takes that question and seeks to understand it, and then it goes and checks a knowledge base of basically the totality of church teaching, which is currently available, and sees if there's any documents which would be relevant to answering that query. It pulls those documents, it extracts them, and then it feeds them to the AI, and the AI then generates its response based on the documents as opposed to the knowledge that may or may not be in its head. And then it provides citations. So you know that everything it's saying is grounded in some kind of document. And of course, we provide you those documents so you can then check them. And that's essentially what Madison is doing in a nutshell. Now, there's a whole bunch of other architecture under the hood. There's a whole bunch of different places we're going to take the product, but that's it in a nutshell.
And it includes, I think, also documents from the Pontifical Oriental Institute. So it basically addresses some of the Eastern Church ideas and thoughts too. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So when we started this project, one of our close collaborators was the Pontifical Oriental Institute in Rome, and there's a number of reasons for that. And they'd come to us a while back and said, their library is one of the rarest collections on the Eastern churches. And so they have people from all over the world who fly there to pull books out of the stacks. And Father David Nazar, who was a rector at the time, realized that this was a bit of a challenge because their constituency was from the Middle East, East Africa, and places like this. And not everyone could afford to hop on a plane to pull a book from their library. And so he wanted to find a way to make the library more accessible to people around the world. And so he came to us and said, is there a way we could digitize it? And initially we were working with FTX on that before they collapsed, but the approach would be very expensive. But then when they collapsed and we had to look at it again, we said, well, there's probably a powerful way we could use AI to do this, and that eventually led to the product Vulgate AI. But essentially, the project was, how do we speed up the rate of digitization of their library, right? Because digitization typically is very expensive, time-consuming, because you have to scan the books. Then if you want to extract that knowledge, you then have to do the cleanup of the data. You have to then you have to label it and then vectorize it. And this is usually been done manually, which is expensive, time consuming. So what we did is we built an AI on-ramp into Vulgate, which automates that process and saves innumerable amounts of time and energy. And in doing so, that enabled us to get our hands on a lot of knowledge, which the Pontifical Oriental Institute had, and they were kind enough to open source that so that we could share it with the rest of the world. And so one of their seminal works, the Encyclopedic Dictionary of the Christian East, is available within Magisterium AI. You can query. And so the project with Vulgate is we started working with the Pontifical Oriental Institute and then the Pontifical Salesian University, and we'll be continuing to expand and include other universities, helping them to digitize their knowledge so they can make it available to their own students and to other universities around the world. And then if they choose to, open sourcing it so everyone can access it.
That's fascinating. So really, anybody in any place in the world could eventually have resources available that come from rare libraries and places where they couldn't go.
This is what I'm super excited about. There were three conditions that were given to us when building Vulgate and with Magisterium AI. Is one, the product has to be available to anyone in the world. Two, it has to be available in their native language. And three, it has to be on any internet-capable device, essentially. And so we knew that when designing our product, because we had to tick those boxes, we had to architect a certain way. And what's incredible about this process of taking a library and vectorizing it, which is vectorizing it or converting it to embeddings, it's like converting the knowledge, the text, into a mathematical expression of its meaning. And this is how Google search works, right? I mean, if you go to Google and you say, what is the stock price for Apple? How does Google know you're talking about the company, not a fruit, right? It's because it actually converts your query into a mathematical expression of its meaning, which tries to capture the intent of your query. And it searches based on the intent, not the actual keywords. And so vectorization works very much along the same line. So when you go to Magisterium AI or you go to Vulgate and you type in a search query, it's converting that to a mathematical expression of the meaning, and it's searching the vector database, all that knowledge converted into math. And that way it's able to extract wisdom, insight, and knowledge from books, regardless of what language they're in. And this is the true power of it. It doesn't matter if the book's in ancient Greek, Latin, whatever else, because it's vectorized, it makes all that knowledge accessible. So what happens is the AI goes and finds vectors that match your query, extracts them, and then gives them to the AI, which then translates them into your respective language. And so that way, those insights are made available to anyone. And so what I'm really excited about, because I think this is already supercharged research, but I think we're only just beginning to see its potentials. It allows libraries to take their holdings and allow anybody to extract the knowledge from that. And one of the other things, as an aside, which has been fascinating to see, is many of the librarians don't even know what's in their libraries. I mean, they may know the title of the book and maybe a little bit about what's in it, but the entirety of that knowledge is not available to them, right? So when you go through and you vectorize the library, because you're vectorizing the entirety of the whole book, when you search with AI through that library, you're going through every single page. And so it's incredible. Some of the insights that get extracted and brought to you, you didn't even know existed. And so I think this has tremendous power to kind of really revolutionize research. And I think it actually is going to contribute a lot to even philosophy and theology.
That's fascinating. I was just thinking as you were talking, looking at the screen right now, you can see my library behind me in my home office. And really those things can go away and be brought into this vectorized environment and be available to anybody around the world who wants those particular books. In fact, many of these books I don't even use the books anymore because it's involved in some of the programs that I have that are based on AI, which is again, it's a fascinating thing. Now, let's kind of take our discussion and bring it over into the area of Catholic education. How do you see Vulgate, Magisterium, other means that are available? How can they be implemented properly and responsibly in a Catholic education setting?
That's a great question. Certainly right now, schools and universities would be one of our largest user groups for magisterium.com. And I think it's pretty obvious, as to why. I mean, if you're educating young people or you're a catechist and you're preparing a lesson, you want to make sure that you have available to you all the relevant resources. And so one of the easiest ways to do that, you can go to Google and start clicking blue links all day, or you can go to Magisterium AI and just type in what you're looking for, and it'll go and search through the knowledge base and present to you all the relevant materials. If you ask it to prepare a lesson plan, it'll prepare you a draft lesson plan, which can save you a lot of time. So, in that respect, I think it's like ChatGPT is being used by, I know, educators a lot. There's a lot of kind of obvious reasons to use it. Longer term, though, I think there's far more potential. So for Catholic educators, obviously, what we want to be confident of is that the information that we're relying on to teach is faithful. And so, one reason to use, let's say, Magisterium AI over ChatGPT is the reasons I mentioned. There's transparency about where the generation is coming from. It provides you the sources right there, which are easy to then cite. So that to us, and that to us is really our mission. At Longbeard, we're building Catholic AI, but we're not trying to build AGI here. What we're trying to build is the most faithful AI system possible, and that's what we're working on every day. How do we ensure this AI system is more and more faithful? And so I think for educators, that's an obvious reason to work with us. But right now, it's more like a question and answer kind of bot. And what we're working on now is and if you look at online education platforms like Khan Academy, and actually Khan Academy just as a collaboration with OpenAI, and if you Google Khan Academy OpenAI, you'll see an incredible tutorial from one of the previous OpenAI launches in which they showcase their AI teaching, I believe, geometry. So Khan is having his son is being taught by OpenAI some geometry, and it's actually visually looking at the page he's interacting with and teaching him. And this, to me, is one of the enormous areas for AI that I think is going to have enormous impact, and that is a personalized tutor. So essentially, having an AI which learns to understand how the student learns uniquely, right? And then what it does is it builds a kind of a custom learning plan for them to help them level themselves up. And so with Magisterium AI and what we're building with Catholic AI is we're looking to build something along the same lines for catechetical instruction and things like that, where teachers or catechists come up and they work to build a kind of a curriculum. And then that curriculum is then given to the AI, and it works with the student on a one-on-one basis to help them understand the concepts and things like that. And then there's ways, of course, then go and validate that. And of course, this is not meant to be a replacement for the classroom environment or for that one-on-one with the teacher, but it's something that they can kind of do on their own at their own pace in a very kind of very private and singular way that we think ultimately will have enormous impacts on education.
What happens to the learning environment? Say a student goes to Magisterium AI and says, uh, write me a paper on St. Thomas Aquinas, and makes it a little bit more specific. And there's that possibility. I think this is one of the fears, that that student could turn that in as their own work. Are there safeguards to keep those things from happening?
Sure. I think one of the things that it's going to be the biggest challenges for education is just recognizing that AI will force a change in pedagogy, and I think that's inevitable. So the short answer to your question is yes, in the sense that we log all the generated responses. So in theory, there's a system right now that we're working to build. An educator could go, they could submit a paper, and we could cross-reference it with our database and see if that's a straight up, that's just someone copying and pasting literally what MAI said. So there's those tools and techniques, but I think ultimately this idea that a student goes home and they write a paper and they submit it, and that's all there is to it. It's going to be very, very difficult to ensure with 100% certainty that there wasn't written by AI. When I was in university, most of the examinations I had were kind of a hybrid mix between some were written papers, others were oral exams. And in many ways, I felt oral exams were better. I mean, the University of Paris, St. Thomas himself used to administer oral exams. And I think because I think more and more students will be interacting with an AI vocally, and they'll be taught vocally, I think that oral exams will probably become more and more necessary, because it's just very difficult to discern whether something written is written by an AI or not. So that's something that we're right now we're talking to a lot of the big Catholic universities about this, and we're very open to conversations and ideas about how best we can serve education to ensure that students aren't misusing the product. But I think ultimately, to be realistic, it's going to require a change in pedagogy.
Is there a program already, or programs that can be developed that a teacher could take all of the papers submitted and put it into a program and have it scan all of them and kick out different concerns about whether or not it's AI generated, to kind of streamline the process?
There are the frontier models are getting pretty good at sniffing out AI, but the problem is they're not entirely reliable, and so it's going to be increasingly difficult to do that. I mean, any platform that takes that on it's going to be an enormous challenge, because AI models and AI itself is just moving so fast. You have to be constantly. So this is why, like I say, you could build a platform like that. You could invest in it, and it would probably work 50% of the time. But over time, I just think it's going to be a losing battle. And so that's why I feel, as opposed to just trying to detect plagiarism, in the form of papers and tests and things, I think it would be better just to get someone live and just ask them questions. And if they're able to tell you to your face, then you know that they understand it, right? And that's probably the safest approach.
The area of creativity with the student, do you see AI as being a benefit or a possible hindrance to a student's creativity and the ability to form and fashion communications, those types of things?
I think that's a great question. I would say certainly there are ways that it may limit people's creativity, but I think that really speaks to motivation, right? So if a student understands why they're learning what they're learning, and they value that, then I think that they'll appreciate that they have to learn it and process it and use their brain and figure it out and grasp it. If they don't value what they're learning because no one bother explaining to them why sufficiently, then they just want to get a passing grade and move on to the next thing, then they probably are going to rely overwhelmingly on AI to do the thinking. So again, I think this is going to have pedagogical implications, which I think is ultimately positive, is that more time is going to be spent explaining why learning something is important for you, for your brain, and for your ultimate prospects. And I think that'll motivate students. And so therefore, they'll want to actually learn it as opposed to being forced. And I think as long as that motivation's there, there's nothing to worry about. I think ultimately for creativity, I think AI is going to be an incredible partner. The ability to kind of, work with a super intelligent machine and throw ideas back and forth, right? I think it's very exciting. And I think schools have to understand, you have to teach them those skills. You have to teach them the ability to work with AI, because I can tell you with 100% certainty, it'll be the students that know how to work with AI that get the jobs. The students who don't will not. And so this is really going to be existential for those who are in high school now.
I think that this is one of the key points is AI is not going to go away. And we have to, it's like anything, even back in the days when social media was first emerging, really it's an amoral uh, media. What you do with it is what makes it either moral or immoral. And to me, it seems the same thing is true with AI. That what we're just we're a little maybe past the bleeding edge to the cutting edge, but we're still learning how to take this technology and really incorporate it into where the church needs to be for today. And I think we're being forced to do that in a world that is moving so fast in this area. Uh, what do you see as the future? Where is this going to take us? Maybe in the next, we can't really tell long term, but maybe in the next 3 or 4 years, what do you see going on?
Well, in the next 3 to 4 years, you'll start to see the march of AI towards AGI, which means AI will be doing more and more of the thinking work. And then you'll start to see more and more intelligent robots. And so it's important when you're thinking about artificial intelligence, people tend to think of it as this, unembodied, thing that sits inside of the cloud. But you can't forget robotics because people joke that AGI is coming for white collar, robots are coming for blue collar. So the level of disruption to the current job market, I think, will be considerable. And I think anyone who says otherwise is probably being paid for by lobbyists. It's going to be fundamentally disruptive to the labor market. Now, for some, I think this is a reason to fear, and I think those fears are justified in this respect. A lot of people define their value by what they do, what their job is, right? And so AI is coming for their job. This can create an existential crisis for some people, right? This is beyond just punching in and punching out for some people. This is how they see themselves contributing to the common good. And so I think there's a very, very important role for the church in all of this because AI and robotics is coming for a lot of jobs. But that doesn't necessarily mean that civilization will ultimately start crumbling as a result. I think in many ways, and I agree with Elon Musk on this, I think we're heading towards and it's not a 3-year horizon, this is more like a 10-year horizon or more, but an era of superabundance. And that means everybody kind of has what they need, including access to information and knowledge. What's going to be important is that they have a clear sense of vocation, and they have a clear sense for what their purpose in life is, which is not just to punch in and punch out and earn money, which is about growing one and intellectually, growing one spiritually, investing time with friends, investing time with your family. And I think if this new AI robotics revolution allows humanity to focus more on those things, I think this could be deeply exciting and enriching for us as a species. We can start focusing more on the arts and things like that, which nobody has time for anymore. But that being said, if the church isn't effective at providing that education, that formation, what I worry about is that people, when they lose their jobs and things, will be bored and they won't know what they're meant to do. They won't feel they have anything to contribute. And then what they may end up doing is just looking for distractions, which means they spend all their time in gaming versus online or going down to the pornography, spiral. And that could lead to civilizational collapse. We already see that there's rapidly declining birth rates around the world, and I expect that's not going to go away. So this is why I'm big on, we have to make sure the church is leveraging AI and trying to share the gospel with every means and tool available to us, because I think if we don't, there could be dire consequences for the next generation.
Really, the church has a great mission then in this AI context of helping people to be aware of their soul. Would that be fair?
Absolutely, and that they are unique. They're imbued with very special gifts, and God has plans for them to use those gifts to serve the common good. And they just have to be creative and open to how those gifts may be used in the future, because it may not be along the lines that we've just been accustomed to.
I wonder if you join me in just doing a little bit of Imagineering and looking at what a Catholic school might look like in 5 to 7 years from now. Because right now, uh, kids come to school, they're dropped off at the door, they go in, they go to their classes, In the upper grades, they're moving from class to class. There's interaction in a classroom environment that, for the most part, is still sitting in chairs and rows with the teacher up front. And, with other things going on, we have, I think, in a lot of the Catholic schools, community systems now built to really bring in more socialization. But do you see, as you talk about a pedagogical change, do you see the school changing, the classrooms changing in this new era of technology?
I think so, inevitably. I mean, nowadays there tends to be a kind of a state-sponsored curriculum that has to be kind of hammered into every student, and then people have to basically pass evals, tests, and if they get, they do well enough in the test, then they can graduate to university, and they kind of need that to have a job, or they can choose that, of course, the blue collar professions, which now apparently amongst Gen Z are becoming more popular again for all kinds of, I think, fairly obvious reasons at this point. But I don't think that's necessarily served humanity that well recently. I think the race to try and get a good job in that competitive landscape means that I hyper focus on passing evals and not enough on leveling myself up. So I think, I'm just going to speak for the Catholic school. I think the Catholic school should be more focused. Not that it's not now, but I think it needs to focus more on formation. How do I ensure that this person has as round an understanding of who they are, what their unique gifts are, and then how do I help this person hone their gifts and become the most extraordinary version of themselves possible? And I think this is going to require a lot more personalization in education. And I think that if less time is needed to be spending on like curriculum, because that, frankly, the AI can do a lot of that coaching and mentoring probably more effectively with the student individually, then what the classroom environment could transform into is a more experiential experience in which the teacher and the student interact in a more kind of personal way. There's a lot more focus on students interacting with one another. And I think in this way, the system would be transformed and would be seen more as an instrument to help people discern their purpose and then living that out. And I think that ultimately will make people happier. So I think this is actually kind of like the wedge we've needed for some time to kind of reorient education away from just passing tests to actually improving people's life.
This is, I think, a very interesting area because even as we look at the culture of today, the movement in AI and all of that, back almost 20 years ago now, Archbishop Miller wrote this wonderful document called, basically it's the Holy See's view of Catholic education, which included these 5 marks. And it seems that as we even look at those 5 marks, they're timeless in terms of being inserted into this new style of education because it calls for community, it calls for mission, it calls for formation, and all of these things. So when you think of where our schools are today, you have a very unique platform, having been in Rome, kind of working globally with leaders, and in terms of also being connected to the AI world in general. I'm sure you have a lot of connection there. When you see all of this, what would you like to say to our teachers and administrators today about their mission in Catholic education and where you see them needing to continue to go?
I think which is most important is for the teachers, as best as they can, to try and understand what AI is and where it's going. And I know for some who are not maybe technologically that interested, that may be a bit of a tough exercise. But there's all kinds of great resources online to quickly get yourself up to speed, and just pay attention. Particularly when it comes to AI in the field of education, as to what's being innovated upon. I mentioned Khan Academy, for instance. They have a very deep connection with OpenAI and are innovating constantly, because what you'll see there is they'll be the early adopters, and you'll start to see more and more of those innovative educational techniques being passed down. And so you want to kind of prepare yourselves for that. So that's one thing. It's just education. The other thing I would say is to encourage as much as possible dialogue with management, and to make sure that you're letting them know your openness to this thing, making yourself available to kind of work with the school administrators to think creatively about how technology can be better integrated into the classroom, how technology could be used to educate kids more at home, And I think if this conversation starts happening, driven more by the grassroots and maybe always waiting for administration to move it, I think that will speed things along in a much more organic way. And I think ultimately it'll lead to better synergy between the students who are already using AI, the teachers, who are of course working with them and realizing this, and the administrators who are trying to figure out how do they meet all the standards that have been passed down to them, while at the same time trying to adapt to this crazy, ever-changing world.
Shifting from the classroom, what kind of an impact is this going to have on students and their families? As the students are involved in AI, it's going to have an impact on the home as well.
Yeah, I think it is extraordinarily already, and I think that the big thing with parents is just not to have that knee-jerk reaction to say no, no, you can't use AI. I don't think ultimately that's going to be in the best interest of the child. I think it's more just understanding what AI is, what its capabilities are, right? Because there's some ways AI should be leveraged, in some ways it probably shouldn't be, and just making sure that they understand that this is a tool, something that's meant to help augment and support your intellectual and your spiritual formation, not something meant to replace your brain. And I think if parents understand that, then they can ensure that that students are approaching with the right balance. So I think that would be one of the most important things. And the second thing I would say, just to parents, is that they're going to need this to succeed in life. They're going to need this if they are going to enter into the job market one day. They're going to need to know how to use this stuff. So them becoming kind of experts in it and learning to master it is absolutely essential. And so, I think encouraging is probably the right path, but encouraging with a greater sense of awareness of what its current capabilities are.
Yeah, I've just noticed as we were talking on the bottom of we're using Zoom, as our technology. They now have another button called AI Companion. So wherever you go, you're running into AI today. And
Right.
that it's just going to be a part of who we are and what we do. When you search on Google, it brings an AI component to it, even there. So for those who are perhaps on the backside of really knowing about AI, they need more information. You talked about Khan Academy. Where do you find that on the internet?
I would just Google Khan Academy, and you can basically see this is one of the largest online education platforms in the world. And their whole project was to make education basically available to people for free in the poorest regions of the world. So a very, very profound, important mission. And so of course AI, because of its ability to democratize learning, they're very much trying to integrate AI as much as possible into the platform so that every student can have a unique educational experience and take advantage of these machines which have access to so much knowledge. And so in many ways, I think that they're kind of the leader in the integration of AI into education. And they certainly are kind of a leader in rethinking pedagogically how education needs to evolve. So that would be one of the first places I would look to. And then I think it's if you're on X or social media and things like that, following some of the big AI players, Anthropic, OpenAI, just to see what they're launching from time to time is always worthwhile, because you may see a certain use case that's very useful to you. For instance, just recently, Google just released a new product called Notebook LM, which allows you to upload documents, PDFs and stuff into the system, and then basically generate an AI podcast in which two AIs are going back and forth and discussing that PDF. And it's an incredibly powerful tool. And so I think if you're aware of tools like that, you can actually find ways to kind of leverage them for your own, to level yourself up, to understand certain concepts and things like that, but also perhaps to even share it with your students.
This world is just fascinating, and it's, as you said, it's evolving every day, isn't it? It's just constantly
Indeed.
changing. Now, Khan Academy, is that CONN Academy or
I believe it's KHAN.
KHAN Academy? Okay, that will help our audience to know where to head for that. Is there an AI primer that's available?
Yes. If you type in explain AI in 10 minutes, there's a great a short little tutorial, which kind of gives an overview of artificial intelligence. And so you'll learn a few kind of the key kind of buzzwords. And I think that's a great way to kind of, start your acclimation to it. Also, there are really good podcasts that are out there, which, I'm thinking of people like Lex Friedman, a very, very popular podcaster who has tech leaders on, very regularly to talk about the implications, where's technology at, where is it headed. And I think, taking the time when you're driving to work to listen to one of those podcasts, I think can be extraordinarily, educational, not just because he talks to some of the leading engineers and they'll talk about some of the technical challenges they're facing and what's going to be coming next, but he also talks to AI we call doomers, people that think that AI could potentially kill us all, which is something that people do believe. And so you get a chance to kind of listen to what their questions and their concerns are. And I think it's very important to listen to those concerns because they're real. Those are real possibilities. And so, of course, we have to understand how AI could go wrong so that we can work backwards and ensure we're making every meaningful step we can make to ensure that doesn't happen. So, anyways, I think Lex Friedman podcast is probably a great source, but there's many others like that.
Very good, Matthew. And one of the things I really appreciate that you're bringing to the table when you're talking about AI for the church is fidelity. That we want fidelity to the teachings of the church. We want fidelity to the magisterium, to the scriptures and all of that. And to me, I think that kind of gives us, especially as Catholics in education and even in our own personal formation, a resource that we can trust and one that can be useful, in a variety of ways. So when we're talking about what you're doing at Longbeard as far as Magisterium and Vulgate and all of that, that's all available to people online. Is that correct? I mean, without subscription, or how do we interface with what you're doing?
Yep, so that's correct. So Magisterium AI at magisterium.com is available to everyone for free. There's a limit to how many queries you can submit week per week, but it's very generous. And the reason for that is we understand that for a lot of people, this might be their first interaction with AI. And so AI is still very new, and so we want to make sure that people's first experience with it is a positive one. And so Magisterium AI will continue to be free for the foreseeable future. If you're really hammering the system because you're using it to, I know certain universities, ministries in the church have used it to design curriculum and things like that, then you can sign up for a pro plan, which is $8.99 or something like that a month. So yeah, I think it's very affordable. Vulgate is available if your school wants to vectorize this knowledge base and make it queryable for teachers for lesson planning and things like that. I know not just educational institutions, but a lot of ministries are talking to us now. Then you can reach out to us if you're interested in Vulgate, and we can set you up with an account. One thing I will announce, which I'm really excited about, we have an AI forum that we're doing called the Builders AI Forum at the Vatican, October 24th to 25th, and we're bringing together most of the ministry that we would know day to day, Word on Fire, Catholic Answers, Augustine Institute will all be there, along with some leaders in the AI industry and some investors and things like that, to figure out how do we build Catholic AI, faithful Catholic AI. And we'll be announcing there formally that we're going to be releasing 2 APIs, and basically an API will allow ministries to build on top of our AI. Like as I mentioned, our mission is to accelerate AI adoption in the church. So one of the ways that we felt this is necessary, because if everybody had to build a knowledge base that we've created of all church teaching, figure out how to mitigate hallucinations and create safety rails, AI adoption would take forever. And so what we figured was, if people could build on top of us, that would save them a lot of time and energy, and they can let us worry about the safety and the fidelity, and they can just focus on building applications. So this API will, to give you an example, let's say I'm on Catholic Answers website and I go to their AI interface and I type a question there. That question would be taken by our AI, and we would check our knowledge base to see if any of our knowledge is useful to the query, and then essentially we would then come and present that to the AI. But what's cool through Vulgate's API, which is the other API we're building, the AI will be actually able to tap into a private knowledge base. So let's say Catholic Answers is knowledge base. So not only is it checking our knowledge base to see if there's any documents relevant to answering the query, but it also could check Catholic Answers' knowledge base. Wow. And they would extract the relevant documents from both, feed them to the AI, and then the AI would generate a response based on both of those sources of knowledge. And so in this way, everyone gets to benefit from Magisterium AI, but they also get to add their own knowledge, which means every ministry has kind of a unique experience. And so these kind of chatbots are one of the ways we're looking to kind of serve the Catholic market. And then, of course, finding ways to kind of power more deep integration into popular apps like Hollow and things like that is something that we're very, very excited to continue to work on exploring as well.
Well, I think you've got your hands full. It is fascinating what we're encountering in this whole, for many of us, a brave new world. And it's exciting to see the way that you're harnessing it, especially for the Catholic world. So, Matthew, thank you so much for being with us today. This has been absolutely fascinating to talk with you about what's happening at Longbeard. And I'm probably going to presume upon you to come back again in a while and share some of, especially after the launching of that new initiative. It's going to be pretty fascinating to see how that can be used by a number of content creators around the world. So again, thank you. And again, if they want to know more about what you're doing, there is longbeard.com. Is that correct?
Yep, that's our company's website. And there's magisterium.com. And then for anyone who's interested in the AI library platform, that's available at vulgate.ai.
Okay, very good. Matthew, again, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
And for those of you who are listening or watching Follow to Lead, we want to encourage you to continue to add comments, to subscribe to our YouTube channel, or follow us on your podcast platform, and leave comments to encourage us on future programming. And for more information about the Duke and Altum Schools Collaborative, please visit our website at diaschools.org. May Almighty God bless you.
We'd like to thank you for joining us on this episode of Follow to Lead, a production of the Duke and Altum Schools Collaborative. To learn more about finding your own path in your journey of faith, or for more information on what we discussed in today's episode, you are invited to follow us on social media and visit us on the web at diaschools.org. To provide a one-time donation or monthly pledge, please visit our website. Your gift will aid us in providing up-to-date information, additional resources, and other support on how to take Catholic education to a higher level. We look forward to helping you follow God's call to lead others to God right here on Follow to Lead.